All right, guys, welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the stream. Welcome if you are new. Thank you so much for joining me today. And thank you, as always, for waiting very patiently while the intro does what it does. Today, we have a pretty interesting topic regarding PlayStation to go over and discuss. And it has to do with Sony's CEO, not PlayStation CEO, but Sony's CEO actually talking about the future of gaming as it pertains to Sony and PlayStation. And of course, this is something that a lot of people are going to have different reactions to. A lot of people are going to have different opinions. I'm going to give mine, of course, but I do think that there are some things with what Sony is saying here, specifically what Sony CEO is saying, that are worth kind of diving into a little bit. So look forward to that conversation. I do just want to give a quick shout out to everybody who tuned into yesterday's stream. Yesterday's stream was awesome. At least I thought so. A lot of support, a lot of interesting conversations happening. And, I just want to make sure you guys fully understand how much I appreciate you and you tuning in. And so with that being said, with that being said, thanks to everybody who tunes into the streams live. If you watch the streams later on when they're not live anymore, thank you as well. Always make sure you utilize those timestamps, okay? Devil Shooter does a great job with the timestamps. They're there for you to take advantage of and hopefully to make your viewing experience better. BB12 is saying the Members Lounge was also good. Yeah, the Members Lounge was really good. I thought so. I enjoyed it. We talked about a bunch of stuff. And so, yeah, keep in mind, if you are a channel member or if you have a membership that was gifted, you gain access to the Members Lounge. Yesterday's Members Lounge was a particularly long one. Really just, again, went all over the place with topics we wouldn't normally talk about here on the regular streams. So if you are a member, go check that out. Over 2.5 hours. Really appreciate that. So, yeah, 3 ways you can support me directly, guys. If it's something that you're interested in doing, consider becoming a channel member. You gain access to some perks, including the Members Lounge. If you're already a member, please consider gifting some memberships. We have a very generous, very amazing community here that consistently gives back to not just me, but the audience as well. So if you are a member, consider doing that. If you're not interested in the member stuff, consider doing what Michael Lynch has done here and donate a super chat. You can ask a question, give an opinion, make a statement, whatever it might be. It all helps me tremendously. I'm only able to run this channel and create the content in the way that I do and in the way that I want, thanks to you guys. So for everybody who contributes, you are the sponsors of the channel. Last thing I'm going to say before reading Michael's super chat here is please do me a favor and hit that like button. If you can't do any of the above things I listed, then please just hit that like button. It helps tremendously with YouTube and helps kind of put the stream out there and the channel out there in front of new people so we can continue to grow this awesome community. Michael Lynch with a $10 super chat. Thank you for that. You're saying it bothers me whenever you talk about Concord. You have a negative connotation. No reason for it. Why can't you just be hopeful for it since it's the first time, since the first time Sony saw it, it made them purchase it. You're not wrong, Michael. I realize that myself, that whenever I bring up not just Concord, but Fair Games, these 2 games specifically, I seem to always have this kind of more negative view of it, right? Like I always talk about how it could be a huge success. It could be, a really great game and surprise everybody. And to be honest, Michael, the reason why I talk about a game like Concord in this way, it's not because I genuinely believe it's going to be bad. Like, oh yeah, it's just going to be a bad game, or that I don't have any hope for it. It's a matter of preparation, so to speak, where it's like I could try to exist in the middle, and I'm able to do that. The problem with doing that is I have nothing to say about it. If I decide, you know what, I'm just gonna look at Concord and say, I don't know what this is, so I have no feelings on it. Then that's it. It makes it so unfortunately I can't talk about it because that's all that's there. And I think that at the end of the day, whenever I do talk about Concord and give my feelings on it, once that's out there, I kind of do come to that conclusion that, well, it doesn't really matter what I think about Concord. It doesn't matter what anybody thinks about Concord because we haven't seen it. But that is something that is worth pointing out. Michael, you're saying when Sony saw it, it made them want to purchase the studio. I do agree that this does give me some type of hope that, okay, Sony is not just willing to put the PlayStation Studios logo behind a game like Concord, but they're willing to actually outright purchase this studio. And you have to think about, why would they do that rather than just partner with them? Well, in my opinion, the only reason Sony would outright purchase a studio is if they were a little bit fearful that, man, this could be the next big thing. What they have is so good that if we don't just straight up lock these guys down, they could slip through our fingers. They could end up, after our partnership is over, somehow going to the competition, or being grabbed up or swiped by somebody else. So I will say that, when I think about titles like Fair Games and Concord, I probably should try to have a little bit more faith in PlayStation. I mean, it's just a matter of, like, I don't want to be let down and disappointed, Like, if the game is really bad, if that is what happens, I just don't want to be like, wow, I can't believe it, I'd rather be in a state of, I was prepared for that, and so because of that, it doesn't really bother me. But the fact of the matter, Michael, is regardless of how I feel about it, whether I feel negative, whether I feel positive, regardless of how you feel about it, regardless of how, as I said earlier, how anybody feels about it, no one knows what this game is. The only people who know what this game is are the developers and the playtesters. That's it. Anybody else doesn't really matter. Unless I'm hearing the opinion of a playtester or a developer, it doesn't matter until we see the game. We do, like, honestly, myself included, it's best to just reserve judgment. So I do appreciate the optimism, though, Michael, because I've said it before and I'll say it again. I would love nothing more than for a game like Concord to be amazing. I said this yesterday. I'll say it again. I'm not rooting for Sony to make bad games. You know what I mean? Like, that makes zero sense for me. It doesn't add up. I play on PlayStation, and so when Sony makes games, I want them to be good. Like, I want them to be fun. So Michael, I do appreciate that super chat, bud. You're saying expect the worst, guys. Breaking into multiplayer is hard. Yeah. I mean, so I'll say this last thing before I move on. I could see Concord existing in a healthy place where it's like it comes out and it's like, yeah, this is a good game. Like, this is a competent, well-made game. Has a good gameplay loop. You can tell that Bungie and Call of Duty and Apex Legends developers worked on it, but it doesn't blow up. You know what I mean? Like, I could see it existing in this just relatively healthy space where it just kind of carves out its little own segment, its own audience, and it's never like a top upper echelon game, but it's just a relatively successful game that Sony's like, okay, yeah, that works. I could see Concord and even Fair Games turning out to be just like that. I think where my negativity really stems from is the ambitious side of it. Like the notion, yeah, basically like a niche product. I get the feeling, and I could be totally off on this, but I don't know that I am. I get the feeling that when Sony is like putting out games like this or buying studios like this, I get the feeling that, like, they're doing so in the hopes that this is going to be the next big thing. And that is what makes me feel like I have to prepare for disappointment, because it's tough. It's really, really tough. And so I guess my hope ultimately is not necessarily whether Concord is a massive hit or not. My hope is that Sony realizes that it's okay if it's not a massive hit and it's just a good game. Michael, you're saying my thing is Sony recognizes quality. If they saw it in that game, I choose to look forward to it. I can't argue with that. Mostly, anyway, right? Like, I'm a believer in, PlayStation Studios quality, right? I don't hide that fact here. Not saying they're perfect, but I understand that mentality where you're saying, well, look, if Sony's willing to get behind it in such a significant way, not only again, not only just their stamp of approval, but we want to welcome you in to the PlayStation Studios family. They had to have seen something relatively good, like it is truly impossible for me to imagine that Herman Hulst like witnessed a really mediocre game, a really underwhelming game, and said, we should buy these guys. Like it would make no sense. So I don't think Concord will be a disaster. You know what? You got me thinking about it now. My thing with Concord is I wonder if it could turn out to be an incredible game. Like, holy shit, Sony found a diamond in the rough here, bro. This game's awesome. But it struggles for the fact that it is coming from Sony and being delivered to the core PlayStation audience that is not necessarily, I don't want to say that they're not receptive to these games, because I don't think that's true, but it's not, again, it's like, I look at the trailer, I look at what people are saying, I look at the lack of viewership and interest, and it's like, listen, when you show Concord off, it's got to look good. It's got to look real good, because that's the only way you're going to get the core PlayStation audience to be like, whoa, So I hope we see Concord soon, though. I mean, again, this is the only first-party PlayStation Studio title lined up for 2024. You really got to wonder, when are we going to see the game? Sooner rather than later. It has to. Yeah, Killzone, absolutely. We'll see. We'll see, man. But Michael, thank you for the super chat. I want to dive into this topic. Sony's CEO makes it clear that PlayStation is expanding beyond the console. Now, this is not shocking news. Listen, I woke up today to seeing people read what the CEO is saying and come to the conclusion, Sony's going third party. Sony's going third party. Now, to be clear, I have been asked by many people, or just told by many people, specific groups of people, for the past 2 weeks, to stop talking about Xbox going third party, to stop talking about the rumors, because that's all they are. They're just rumors, likely baseless rumors of games like Sea of Thieves and Hi-Fi Rush coming to PS5. And when we hear Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella say word for word, we're going to be a great publisher on PlayStation and Nintendo. No. You're misunderstanding what he means. He's just talking about Activision. And that's fine. I get it. People get annoyed because there's people out there making it sound like, well, there you go, guys. 100% confirmed Xbox full-blown third party. But realistically, everybody was looking at this, or not everybody, but rational, normal people looked at that and said, that's peculiar. Now, we're not jumping to the conclusion that every game going forward from Microsoft is going to be third party, but it seems like they might be leaning into it a little bit more. Maybe some of them will, right? Is it really so insane? Are you really on that much copium? How much copium do you really have to be on to get all of that on the Microsoft side of things and say, well, I don't know, maybe one day Starfield could come to PS5? No. The answer is no. And anybody who tries to tell you otherwise, they're fucking lying. Straight up. But today, based off of what Sony CEO said, I come across an article from Windows Central, written by Jez Corden. And then I'm going to read to you what was posted on the Windows Central Twitter account for this article. God of War on Xbox? Sony CEO Kenichiro Yoshida said in a recent interview, quote, "Wherever there is computing, users will be able to play their favorite games seamlessly," end quote. Echoing Microsoft's recent comments on the future of gaming. You cannot make this shit up, people. You cannot make this shit up. We are told for 2 weeks straight, they're not, stop saying Halo's going to be on Xbox. Stop saying Xbox is going to be third party, okay? You're misunderstanding, you're misinterpreting. Just to the very next week, God of War on Xbox? He said computing, people. He said computing, so that must mean Xbox. Computing. I swear, man, it's not that serious. It's actually all just very stupid. But you have Microsoft straight up saying, yeah, we're going to publish on PlayStation. You have Sony saying, yeah, we're going to be on devices that compute. And it's like, okay, you know what? Let's just make it simple. Let's make it easy for everybody. Microsoft and Sony are going third party, people. Brace yourselves. Prepare yourselves. You will see some crazy shit happening in the coming years. Now, I don't know. Maybe they're going third party. Maybe not. But I do think we are going to see some crazy shit. And Michael Lynch with another $20 or $10 super chat says it could also be the case that even if it's awesome and a mature shooter doesn't mean success. It seems the most successful live service games are kiddie-like. Well, Michael, you're definitely not wrong there. I mean, I still always look to PUBG and Fortnite, where it's like PUBG was not geared towards kids or children. Not at all. And it was not a simple game. It was actually a pretty complex game in terms of mechanics. But it blew up, man. And it was like, we've never seen anything like it. And then Fortnite came along and just seemingly steamrolled it. You know, where it's like, well, how'd they manage to do that? And I think it's obvious. It's like, dude, we need to make a simpler, more family-friendly, wider appealing version of this game. So knowing that and seeing that, yes, many of the most successful games, even Call of Duty, man. Like Call of Duty, I wouldn't say is like kiddie, but, well, I don't know, dude. You play our match of Call of Duty, you're going to hear kids. You're going to hear kids playing it. Call of Duty's not that mature anymore. Like, if you look at the stuff that is there on the multiplayer side of things, it you know, even they're kind of dabbling in this area where it's like, let's just get a little silly with it, you know, and just try to make it more widely appealing. So it's possible, bro. It's possible that Concord could lean heavily in that direction, and maybe that would be the wiser decision if they're trying to have mass appeal. I mean, I'll put it to you this way. I don't think Concord's going to look anything like Killzone. I'll tell you that. For better or for worse. So, Michael, I do appreciate your super chats, man. And you are right in that just because a game is more mature and has a more realistic art style doesn't guarantee its success. Yeah, I got to go check out that new Helldivers 2 trailer. You want a Killzone reboot one day? I don't know. I don't think we're ever going to get Killzone again from Sony. I just get that feeling. But getting back on track here, I'm not going to apologize. I had to go on this little rant here at the beginning because I just want to point out the ridiculous hypocrisy that makes its way across the internet with these different narratives that are constantly being written where, you know, apparently we are port beggars because we're interpreting pretty straightforward comments from Microsoft about about publishing on PlayStation, and we become port beggars because we need those Xbox games on PlayStation, don't we? We really do. But this, you know, the same energy and the same question marks are not raised when we're getting articles a week later of Windows Central literally saying, like, God of War on Xbox? Well, you know what? Let's go over the actual quote. So, Sony CEO, Sony Group Corporate, hold on, let me back up here. From Zubitech, first off, on Twitter. Sony Group Corporation Chairman, President, and CEO Kenichiro Yoshida on the future of gaming. Quote, in short, It will be ubiquitous. Wherever there is computing, users will be able to play their favorite games seamlessly. Gamers will be able to find a place to play in different spaces. While PlayStation will remain our core product, we will expand our gaming experiences to PC, mobile, and cloud. Now, here's what Kenichiro Yoshida had to say on subscription services. Quote, "We do subscription business model at the same time people usually play play one game at a time. So all you can eat type of many games and may not be so valuable compared to video streaming services. We have a kind of balanced hybrid service on PlayStation Network, subscription as well as pay per content." Now, he does comment on artificial intelligence. I'll read that one later, but he comments on the Microsoft and Activision Blizzard acquisition, and he says, quote, "Healthy competition is necessary, but they are bitches." No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. He didn't say that. He didn't say that. He said healthy competition is necessary for the games industry to grow. And at Sony, we believe it is important to provide gamers with different options to play. So we will continue our efforts to achieve this. This is what Sony CEO had to say on these three, I'd say, pretty interesting topics, pretty prevalent topics. Could you imagine Sony CEO be like, "We respect healthy competition, but they are bitches." So, yeah, let's dissect this a little bit. Okay, let's go look over here at the first comment. Again, people are interpreting this how they want to interpret it, but I'll say this. If you read this comment from Sony CEO, in short, it will be ubiquitous. Wherever there's computing users, they'll be able to play their favorite games seamlessly. Gamers will be able to find a place to play in different spaces. While PlayStation will remain our core product, we will expand our gaming experiences to PC, mobile, and cloud. If you walk away with that and say, well, Sony's going third party, okay, I'm not going to argue with you. There's no reason for me to, because I can't say that they are or they are not. However, what I will say, not to argue, but just something to keep in mind, is he doesn't mention publishing on other consoles. He doesn't mention publishing on other competing platforms other than PC. Although PC, it's worth noting that it's been revealed through job listings that Sony is planning, well, they're already working on it. They're going to be releasing at some point in the future their own launcher on PC. So you will be able to access the PlayStation Store through that launcher. You'll be able to access, I would assume, like PlayStation trophies and PlayStation Plus and stuff like that. So this is happening. And I know that there are likely going to be some Xbox people that are, going to say, hey, they're copying Microsoft. You're damn right. You're damn right. Sony's copying Microsoft. So there's just no way around it. However, there is one huge difference between what Sony's doing and what Microsoft is doing. Sony CEO straight up said, like, yeah, we have PlayStation Plus and we have a subscription, but that it's just, it's for, he basically, if you whittle down or read between the lines, like what he said, he's basically just saying that, like, we're gonna put some games in the PlayStation Plus occasionally, and people will play them that way, and it'll just be like he's talking about subscription like it will be supplemental to their main business model. So something that he does make clear here, regardless of the platform stuff, is that Sony is not deviating or shifting away from the traditional model of buy our games. That's, that we're going to sell our games, we're going to buy them. That's how we're going to make the bulk of our money and profit. That is obvious, but, it's just worth highlighting here. Now, when it comes to Sony embracing PC, I think the question here is, and to me, it's a natural question that people would end up asking, and that is, well, he says, word for word, PlayStation will remain our core product. He's referring to the console. We need to make that clear. And he didn't say PlayStation console, but he says PlayStation will remain our core product. The PlayStation product. he's talking about the PlayStation console. And then he mentions PC, mobile, and cloud. Now, I've even seen some people reading this and jumping to the conclusion that, well, clearly, clearly he means, or when he mentions PC, they're going day one on PC. It's possible. It's possible, but I'm not convinced that we're there yet. I'm not convinced that Sony is going to. I think Sony will. You know what? I'll say this. I think there will come a day where Sony experiments. I think there will come a day where Sony says we're going to take one of our games. I don't know which one. I don't know that it'll be the biggest game, like not Wolverine or something. Or I don't know. Maybe it could be one of the bigger games. One of the games that no matter what, it'll succeed. Right. So they could go in that direction, but I think the day will come where they will experiment and they're going to say, we're just going to drop this on. It's a single player game. We're going to drop it on console and PC same day and see what happens. And Sony kind of did this. There's a caveat here. They kind of did this with Horizon Forbidden West with PlayStation Plus, where they dropped Horizon Forbidden West into PlayStation Plus just 1 year after it launched. And you could clearly tell they did it to experiment to see what would happen. Well, it boosted interest in the game, but it killed sales. Like it just stopped selling after that. And I think that's pretty obvious why we haven't seen Sony do that a second time. Like now when we get certain games on PlayStation Plus, I mean it's usually not within a year. Like God of War Ragnarok's still not on PlayStation Plus, Spider-Man 2 will not be on PlayStation Plus by October next year. At least I definitely don't think it would be. And so you have to imagine that this could be something that makes Sony hesitant, but at the same time, they haven't experimented with this yet. Sony has not experimented by dropping a game day one on PS5 and on PC. And the thing about them dropping a game day one, a single player game that is on PC and PS5, is it does still fall in line with their actual goal, which is we want to sell video games. So if they were to drop, I guess we'll just use Wolverine for now because we really don't know what else is coming. If they drop a game like Wolverine day one on PC, the question that Sony's going to be asking themselves is this going to like really hurt our console sales? If so, that could be problematic. But how many more sales are we going to get overall by dropping Wolverine onto PC day one? Will that outweigh the potential loss in consoles sold? It's a tough thing because Sony doesn't really have the answers to this. They can't have the answer to it until they actually try it and see what happens. But until then, they just have to crunch the numbers and assume, or look at competitors. Like I could see why Sony probably looks at Microsoft and thinks, well, their console sales are not great, so maybe that would happen to us if we did exactly what they did, like exactly to a T what they did. But then again, they're dropping games day one in the Game Pass as well. So Sony has to navigate this and figure it out. But I think the important thing, like the true important takeaway here with what Sony CEO is saying is exactly what I said in the title. That, dude, PlayStation is truly beginning to expand beyond the console. And I think that there will be some people, I think that there are some people who are going to get upset by this notion or, take a certain stance. But the reality is it doesn't matter how upset you get. It doesn't matter how you feel. This is a billion-dollar corporation doing what a billion-dollar corporation feels they need to do to, enter the future, whatever the future of gaming is. I don't think there's any denying at this point that, look, I can tell you I don't care about mobile gaming. I don't game on PC, and I certainly don't care about cloud gaming. But what I can tell you is that these things are absolutely extremely relevant in the gaming space right now. And regardless of my feelings on them, they're going to remain relevant, and they're likely going to become even more relevant as time moves forward. I think that earlier on, maybe at the end of the PS4 generation, going into the PS5 generation, some people, myself included at times, didn't, it all felt like, no, we're not there yet. Like, there's no way, right? Like, we're just not there yet. And then it's like, you flash forward 3 or 4 years into the PS5 gen, it's like, no, we're pretty much, like, we're not fully there, but we're like well on our way at this point. And I just think it would be best for people to just kind of put the pitchforks and torches down on either side and just realize that, dude, these companies are going to try to not upset their core fan base, but at the same time, like, they're going to make moves that, like, I'll put it to you this way. It's pretty clear based off of these comments from Sony CEO that he's not worried about a person getting upset, like a PlayStation console owner getting upset that they're going to put games on PC, that they're going to pursue mobile and cloud. He's not worried about that. And because of that, I would say you as the player shouldn't worry about that either. Like, there's no reason to. The only real worry, I would say, at least for me, is it kind of harkens back to the quote. He said, PlayStation will remain our core product. That to me is the huge difference. Like, again, I mentioned earlier that people are going to say, well, Sony's copying Microsoft, and they are. Like, for in a broad stroke sense, yes. At one point in time, and I was there for these conversations, okay? And I'm just going to acknowledge the elephant in the room, that certainly many people out there are happy to point out, and that is, a couple years back, there were conversations that, like, Sony would never do what Microsoft is doing. Like, they wouldn't do this and they wouldn't do that. And it turns out that, well, it was half right and half wrong. It was half right in the sense that, yeah, they're not going to copy Microsoft and do exactly what Microsoft is doing, but they're going to take plays out of Microsoft's playbook and do what they're doing. And that's exactly, who was first to go start putting their games on PC? It was Microsoft. Who was first to start really trying to expand into cloud and stuff like that? Well, hold on. Ironically enough, and see, this is where I think sometimes it can be, even I misremember. It was actually Sony. As insane as that sounds, dude, it was Sony buying Gaikai. But the problem was Sony didn't really know what to do with it, or it was a little too soon, and it didn't really make any waves. And it really didn't seem like it was until Microsoft said, we're now going to do cloud gaming. And then they tried to put like a bigger emphasis on it. Like, yeah, we're getting more serious with it. And now Sony is seemingly, even though they were the first ones there with Gaikai, and even before that, there were other companies that were trying to do cloud, like, way too soon. Funny enough. But you can tell that Sony's just like at that point where it's like, okay, Microsoft got pretty serious about cloud and they kind of went in a different direction. We should consider maybe trying to go in that direction a little bit as well. There's nothing wrong with that. It makes sense. If Microsoft's doing something that's working business-wise and is smart, why not take notes? Just like Microsoft should do if Sony's doing something smart, and working business-wise. And then you look at, the subscription space, and this to me is a little bit different because it's like, again, Sony's not copying Microsoft, but you can tell they're still trying to make sure that they're doing something. This is why PlayStation Plus Extra and Premium were created. But all in all, when you separate these things, and listen, the reason why I'm putting Sony and Microsoft up here is because when you hear things like this, it is no matter what. In the same way that when Microsoft makes comments like they did the past 2 weeks and the rumors come out, right? It's going to catch the attention of the PlayStation fan base alongside the Xbox fan base because these things are, to an extent, intertwined. And it's no different here when Sony CEO is just flat out saying, like, it's going to be ubiquitous. We're expanding. The PlayStation's the core focus, but PC, mobile, cloud, right? I mean, PC, Windows is huge. Microsoft has a massive presence. Microsoft is PC to an extent, right? So, yeah, OnLive. Oh my God. OnLive was the first one, bro. So far ahead of its time. No one, I don't think people like understood what OnLive was. I remember that. Damn, dude. That's crazy. Was there anybody before OnLive? Imagine if whoever had that idea for OnLive had that idea like 5 years ago and said, we should do this now. But I'm laying these things out because, again, man, I'm seeing people talk about Sony going third party. I think you're jumping the gun. Did Sega? I think if you're somebody who's reading this, and look, I understand there are going to be people trolling. I'm not talking about the trolls. I'm talking about people who are actually reading this and coming to the actual conclusion that, oh, I think they're going third party. I think you're going to want to pump the brakes on that. In the same way that, listen, people are going to ask questions. Is God of War coming to Xbox? Are you really gonna take that away from these comments? I mean, look, if that's really what you want to take away from it, go ahead. But I'm not saying it's impossible and will never happen. See, that's the thing. I had this conversation with you guys, and I want to reiterate this. I don't care if people agree or not. I'm taking my stance on this. And that is, I'm not going to sit here and say you will never see a PlayStation game on Xbox. I would never say that. Because I don't know that. Why would I claim to know that? I don't know that. I also don't know that you will. Or that won't happen, right? Like that it turns out you never will. I don't know that either. All I know at this point is that we need to look at Sony PlayStation and look at what has changed from 2018, 2019, towards the end of the PS4 generation. And then you look at everything that has changed and occurred between then and January 2024. Multiple things have happened that people, and I know this for a fact because I was there, that people said would never happen. And then they happened. Not like 8 years later. They happened very quickly. So I'm not jumping to any conclusions either way. Okay, I know I pointed out the hypocrisy earlier, but the reality is no one knows. And anybody who claims to know, unless it's coming from somebody who literally is a high up executive at Sony or Microsoft, it doesn't matter. People are going to interpret these comments as they want, how they want. But there is just one other thing I got to say here. Well, I'm sure there's more than one other thing I got to say, but I meant to say this earlier. The big major difference here in what Sony CEO is saying compared to not only what Xbox has said at times or Microsoft has said, but just the way that they are proceeding, right? PlayStation will remain our core product. I think that right there is the true differentiating factor between Sony's ambitions and Microsoft's, or maybe you could say the different approach, because I do feel that at the end of the day, what Sony and Microsoft are both realizing is that they just want the same thing. Maybe they've always known that. I'm saying that now because it seems like with all the things that Microsoft did the past 10 years, it started to seem more and more like, but do they really want the same thing? I don't know. And now I think it's become very clear that yes, they want the same thing. And that is that they just want to be they want to court a much bigger market. That's all it boils down to. They want to have a much bigger market to sell games to or to get money from. It's that simple. And it seems that Microsoft, I think the difference in approach between Sony and Microsoft is Microsoft basically was much quicker to say, fuck it, rip the Band-Aid off. This is what we're doing. Throw the games on PC, put them on Game Pass, right? Console, put that shit in the back seat. Let's go. Cloud, let's go. Mobile, let's go. And I feel like Sony's approach has been slower. It's been more like, all right, we're not going to rip the Band-Aid off. We're going to just slowly, little by little, you're going to feel it, but then, we're going to relax. And then we'll come back and then we'll do a little bit more, and I think that's the difference between Sony and Microsoft right now. And I think we're kind of at that point with Sony almost where the Band-Aid is almost fully ripped off. There's still some there, still kind of hanging on, but it's not fully ripped off. And I don't know whether, I'm not here to say either approach is right or wrong, but I think the reason why Sony was like, well, we're just going to slowly peel that Band-Aid off rather than just rip it off and get it over with is because what Sony is doing while they're peeling that Band-Aid off is we're still selling a large amount of consoles. Like the console model is still doing wonders for us. It's working wonders for us. We're succeeding. This is why it was so easy for Microsoft to just rip that shit off because they're like, dude, we can't sell consoles. We can't compete with Sony and Nintendo console wise. So what's stopping us from just saying, fuck it, rip the Band-Aid off? That's the difference. That is the difference between both of these. You're saying you hate Sony's strategy. Well, there's nothing you can do about it, man. You could stop supporting them, but the reality is, or at least I think the reality is beginning to dawn on everybody that regardless of how you feel about their strategy, eventually everybody's going to go in this direction. Even Nintendo. Like Nintendo could do it. Like I feel like there's a possibility that Nintendo could be like 50 years late to it or something like that, where they're like way late to the party, but this is what's going to happen. And I've come to the conclusion that it's going to be technology that does it. It's not going to be us. Like, and what I mean by that is it's not going to be anybody saying like, no, we have to bet on this or we have to bet on that. It's going to happen naturally because of technology. And I honestly can tell you that in all the time that I've thought about this stuff and talked about it, I just never really quite thought of it that way. Like I never came to that conclusion that, wait a second, it's not going to be Microsoft forcing anything. It's not going to be Sony, forcing anything. Nobody's going to force anything. It's going to be the market. It's going to be that the technology is going to advance to a point where everyone's going to look at each other and say, well, that just makes sense. It's going to get to a point where not going in that direction would begin to seem very stupid. It would clearly be like, why the fuck are you doing this? I feel like people have been behaving this way towards Sony for the past couple years, but the reality is like, we're still not there. Like I said, we're on our way, but we're still not there. And I think we're just going to get to that point eventually. I'm at a point where I'm thinking, okay, maybe it will happen a little bit sooner than we think, but we are going to get to that point maybe 5 more years from now or so, or 8 years, maybe in the next decade, where it's just that change is going to happen. That change is going to a certain extent where it's just something is going to come out and change the way people view how they interact with games. To a certain, maybe it'll start small, but that'll be the catalyst where it's like, oh, okay. Some people are saying that that's Resident Evil 4 on the iPhone. I don't think so. I think that's like again, it's like on live. It's like it's too soon. Very few people are going to actually care about this, but that is where it's headed. where it's going to become more prevalent, more prominent. And even if we're just looking at cloud, we're still not there with cloud, but this is the future that these companies are preparing for, and these are technology companies. These are tech companies. Sony's an electronics company. Microsoft, I mean, they're all over the place, but they're software company, but they're I consider Microsoft's a tech company. It's just they see like the advancements that are happening. They see the pipeline, and when they think about, okay, how do we increase profitability? How do we manage the increasing cost of AAA game development? It's just these are avenues. It's like, well, look at that. That door is opening to potentially become, to eventually, again, it's what Jim Ryan did say that one time, where he's like, it's great that we get tens of millions of people playing our games, but it would be amazing if we could get hundreds of millions. And that is the future. I think that will change games. I think that will change how games are made. I think that will change the expectation of what a AAA game is to a certain extent. But that seems to be where it's headed. And at this point, I don't think I could see it any other way. But who knows? Maybe we're all wrong. Maybe something's going to come out of left field and throw all of this off course. Let me see here. So Sony CEO also had to say this about artificial intelligence. He says, the convergence of computing and entertainment is a mega trend and is also born out of computing, so we cannot get in the way of technology. But at the same time, entertainment is a people business. For example, it is technically possible to create a movie scene in which Tom Hanks speaks Japanese with perfect lip sync. But should we? I love that. Should we? Should we create that scene where Tom Hanks speaks Japanese with perfect lip sync? Sony really asking the important questions here. He says that is the question. The content that forms the basis of entertainment is creator-generated and copyrighted. Creators' involvement is essential. Therefore, Sony positions AI as a technology that supports creators. AI should not replace them. One example is games. Games are computer software. It is made by programming language. LLM, large language models, will help streamline game development, allowing creators to focus more on creativity. So, I mean, I think this is pretty good with what he's saying here about AI. I think he's saying what I would like to hear, which is like, okay, yeah, people first, human creativity. AI is not here to replace humans. For Sony anyway, and I think that's good. I think that's what a lot of people want to hear. But he's also making it clear that we're still going to utilize it, and we understand that it's evolving and it could help to a certain extent. It could help the creators themselves, right? So that's good. I mean, it would have been pretty terrifying if he was like, "Yeah, we're hoping that we can just replace people with AI and get perfect products." Like that would have been terrifying. We have Solo in it with a $10 super chat saying, I think you have a point with the Band-Aid example, but Sony's approach is going to be more balanced. Console exclusives will always be first, with everything else being used as supplemental income. Yeah, so that to me is still the biggest question mark. Well, let me put it to you this way. We have our answer. Like Sony CEO said, yeah, PlayStation is the core product. So what he's saying is, our main focus is the PlayStation console. That hasn't changed. But there's always this growing... The question mark gets bigger and bigger and bigger each generation. And especially now as we're talking about cloud, we're talking about mobile, right? We're talking about Sony expanding the PC in a significant way for the first time. The question mark gets bigger and more prominent. And the question is just simply like, for how long? Like is the PS5 the last generation where the PlayStation console is the main focus? No. Okay. What about the PlayStation 6 generation? And I think the reality is that the answer to that question is no one knows. I think that's the reality. I think Sony says, you know what? This is working, and there's no indicator right now that it's going to stop, right? That it's going to just suddenly stop working. So we will keep doing it. And if the day comes, whether that's in the middle of the PlayStation 6 generation, the beginning of the PlayStation 7 generation, where suddenly it stops working, but that's because something else is working even better. Suddenly, more and more people are flocking to the cloud to play their games, and less people are buying consoles to play their games. And console sales start to slow down or stagnate or just, you know, drop, right? Then Sony will say, okay, we're there now. Then Sony CEO will come out and say, the PlayStation console is no longer our main focus. Now the PlayStation console is supplemental. So the transition hasn't happened yet. You know, the flip hasn't happened yet. And I talk about like this is where it's headed, but there's still the question of, okay, but like when does it arrive? Like when do we arrive there? If that's where we're headed, that's you know, that's the destination. When and no one knows that. I think companies like Microsoft are trying to have an influence on that, where it's like the sooner we get there, the better. So we're going to try to do everything we can to usher it in sooner. But it's the if Sony had an answer to that question, if any company had an answer to that question, I mean, at that point, you're talking about being able to read the future, you know, and prepare for the exact moment. Like, okay, now is the time, and you become the most successful company in the world. You know, it's not easy to predict that, and I don't think anybody really can. And so, I think you're right, soloing it. I think that Sony is going to have a much more balanced approach because their model still works for them, because it's not Sony that's in third place console sales wise. It's not Sony that is finding out, you know, that, oh man, like no one in Europe is buying our console. It's the opposite. Sony's finding out that they're basically like dominating these certain regions, and Sony might not be able to turn and say, you know, we're gonna hit 180 million consoles sold. Probably not. No, but it's just, hey, 100+ million consoles sold, 110, 120. That, you know, these are customers that are like invested, like they're gonna buy games. They're likely gonna subscribe to PS Plus, or, you know, they're not just passing on by, so to speak. At least most of them, right? Like that's so critical to play. Like that is PlayStation's model, dude. Like if Sony were to come out and make it known that like, yeah, we're not prioritizing the console, and they said we're going to now prioritize PS Plus, or we're going to prioritize cloud or mobile. Oh my God. It's over. It's over, dude. You know, these transitions don't happen forcefully unless the worst happens, you know? And again, if you want to watch the worst happen for a console manufacturer, well, we've seen it. You know, go look at Sega. But more recently, look at Microsoft. Like the worst, like even Phil said, like that was the worst generation to lose. Like there's no coming back from this. And when that happens, it forces their hand where it's like, okay, well, if we're going to survive, what do we do? Well, we gotta embrace a new model. Okay, let's embrace a model that people aren't necessarily ready for yet, but that's okay. We have the luxury of time. We can wait. Why is that? Well, because we now have Microsoft's full backing as the Xbox brand. It's a very unique situation, and it's one that could only occur in that specific way. If Sony eventually does get to that exact point that Microsoft is, where it's like suddenly Sony's position has shifted in in terms of their view, where it's like, yeah, we do look at subscriptions differently now. We do look at PlayStation Plus the same way that Microsoft looks at Game Pass, or just something along those lines. There will be a major occurrence that causes that transition. Like something like that doesn't just like it doesn't just happen for the sake of it. So it'll be really fascinating to see how this all pans out. Venino with a $5 super chat saying Spider-Man needs to be multi-plat. Look at Hogwarts' success. Sony games budget will keep going up because we're expecting Spider-Man 3, The Last of Us 3, Ghost of Tsushima 2, God of War to be bigger and better. Well, that to me that this does lead to a fascinating question, and I want to dive into it. But before I do, I want to read what Rich Rod 908 is saying. And he's saying, new Helldivers trailer, bigger than I expected. Yeah, I got to check this trailer out. I'll try to bring it up before the end of the stream. It's good to see. It's good to see people getting hyped for Helldivers and it's good to see Sony kind of getting it out there, But you're saying Spider-Man needs to be multi-plat. I mean, it depends on what you mean by multi-platform. I think people need to realize that Sony doesn't look at Microsoft and their console as a road to success. A road to more, to it's not, what I'm trying to say is the Xbox console is not a viable answer to Sony's problem. It's not a viable solution to Sony's problem. It's not even a solution to Microsoft's own problems. And this is what people need to realize is that, yes, Sony could say, hey, we're going to put, because if you're talking about like putting Spider-Man on PC, that's already happening. That's already, like Spider-Man 2 is going to come to PC probably next year. Like I would assume Spider-Man 2 is a game that they want to fast track just because it's like, it's Spider-Man. Let's capitalize on this, assuming it's not, we sold all the consoles we would right now for the, for this one exclusive, but sales are slowing down. PS5 sales are still fine. Let's get that on PC. But the idea that Sony wants to take Spider-Man 2 and say, okay, we want to take the time and resources to make an Xbox port and release it on Xbox Series X and S. Keep in mind, it's not a PS4 game, so they'd have to scale it down to the S. Well, I guess if they're going to port it to PC, I don't know what the minimum specs of Spider-Man 2 are going to be. Nobody knows yet. They'd have to take time and effort to do that, to optimize it for these consoles, and then they're going to sell it to an install base of 25 million, knowing that this install base has been conditioned to not fucking buy games. It makes no sense whatsoever for Sony to do that. And so if you say that Sony needs to be multi-plat, that's where they're headed, excluding Nintendo and Xbox consoles. I mean, I don't think you'll ever see a PlayStation game on Nintendo because I still think Sony sees Nintendo as a competitor. Maybe not like the most direct competitor, but in the sense that like I think Sony would be terrified that if they tried to get Spider-Man 2 on the Switch 2, they would think, oh man, people might just decide to get the Switch over our own console. Like, would it sell well? Yes, it would. It's the Switch. It's going to have a huge install base, but it greatly conflicts with their console strategy. And again, putting it on Xbox, there's also that conflict. But when people say like, this is why I think some Xbox fans are being absolutely ridiculous when we talk about some Xbox games coming to PlayStation. Like, dude, that makes sense for Microsoft way more than it does for Sony. And that's what people don't fucking realize. When Microsoft takes a game like Hi-Fi Rush and says, if we put this on PS5, you're putting this game on a platform whose install base is more than double your own. More importantly, on a platform where people buy their fucking games, dude. Like on a platform where we are not, it's not even a matter of being conditioned to buy games. That's what we do. That's our option, to buy games. So if you're Microsoft, you're like, why wouldn't we do that? The only thing Microsoft has to gain are more sales than they would probably ever get on their own console. The same cannot be said in the reverse for Sony taking time and effort to port their games to Xbox. That's my thoughts on it anyway. You know, it just there's too much conflict. I think it's like when Sony says, okay, do we take time and effort to optimize for PC or for Xbox? What do I even need to answer that question? I don't. We already know the answer to that question. So this is why I think it's it's not as simple as if Sony just puts all their games everywhere, they'll win. It's not that simple because they would lose something huge in the process. And that thing that they will lose, or seemingly might lose, there's a good chance, is the thing that in Sony's case and also in Nintendo's, and at one point in time, even Microsoft, that is what's allowing you to win. You know, it's the fact that, hey, you want Spider-Man 2, you got to buy a PS5. So a lot of people, a lot of casuals say, well, I want to play Spider-Man. Well, it's only on PS. Okay, it's only on PS5. I'll buy PS5. You just roped in a customer. How? With a game. You leverage that game and you tell that customer $500 for the console, and then sign into the network, create a name. And then from that point forward, it's just, all right, you invested this much money. Are you just going to drop us now? Or are you going to maybe take a look at the PlayStation Store, see what we have on offer? Now, I'm trying to communicate that, like, that still works for Sony. That doesn't work for Microsoft anymore. That's the difference. That doesn't work for That's not how Microsoft gets customers. Microsoft gets customers by saying, we're going to try to bring our shit to you, and we're going to try to get it to you as cheap as possible, and we hope that you support it. That's not what Sony's doing. And the idea that Sony will need to do that, I don't think you're totally wrong. I think that the need for that, again, it's like, well, in order to cover development costs, what would be a smarter option for Sony to try to bring these games to more people, or to ask the people that they court into their ecosystem and their console to say, we need you to pay more money for our games. We need you to pay $80 or $90 or something. So it is a conundrum that exists, but it's just Sony. I think what Sony has to be very careful with, and I think they know this, I think this is why it should be obvious. The reason why Sony has to be slow with their approach and be very thoughtful and strategic is because they do have something to lose. That once you lose it, you cannot get it back. And that is, you have a strong console ecosystem with, most important, and this is the most important part, with a massive player base conditioned to buy games. Anything you do outside of that, you have to be careful and mitigate the risk. You cannot just start dropping your games day one on PC, your single player games, because you do not know how that will affect your console sales. You do not know. You have to eventually experiment. Try it with one game. If it goes well, try it with another. If the second game suddenly console sales are like, holy shit, that's a huge dip in console sales, reel it back in. All right? Because once Sony loses that, they're never going to get it back. They know this. Everybody who's involved in the console space knows this. Microsoft can't turn around. Dude, Microsoft can't turn around next console generation and say, here's Halo whatever, right? Or Gears whatever. And say, or Elder Scrolls 6 for that matter. They can't, with the next Xbox console generation, come out and say, here's the Elder Scrolls 6 Xbox Series 2 exclusive. Xbox 720 exclusive. They can't. They can't. Like, dude, people would kill themselves if they did. Like, it would be over for them because it's just too much. You can't put that genie back in the bottle, you know? Like, once you tell people, hey, Game Pass, hey, our game's on Game Pass, hey, our game's on PC, hey, our game's on PC Game Pass, you don't have to buy the console. You can't go back. You can't. Sony knows this, and that's why it's like, that's why I said earlier that if Sony were to suddenly switch up their model here, like if you just see suddenly Sony flips the switch and says, yeah, we're dropping all our games on PC day one, that means they saw something in their data that tells them the PS5 is not going to hit 100 million. Certainly not 120, certainly not 130. It's not. Like they would have to see something that tells them like this is going down, not up. It's going down, and it's going down quick. So you need to figure it the fuck out. It basically, what I'm trying to say is it boils down to the market, man. It really boils down to the market. If people get to a point, and I'm not just talking the core fan base, but the more casual, the general market, if people get to a point where they're just not interested in buying PlayStation consoles anymore, and that's just not what they want to do, even for the exclusives, and the market eventually communicates to Sony, like, we're not supporting this anymore, then you will see Sony shift. At the end of the day, when you put all the conjecture aside, if there's one thing you can always be sure of, is that these companies, whether it's Microsoft, whether it's Sony, whether it's Nintendo, anybody else out there, they have to react to the market. They have no choice. The market dictates ultimately the decisions that these companies make. Because it will always be as simple as they want our money. They have to offer us something for a certain amount of money. And the market will determine if whatever it is they're offering, whether it's $10, whether it's $70, whether it's $40, does this look worth that money? It's that, I know that's like, well, duh, but you'd be surprised that when people get into these conversations, they seemingly lose sight of that simple fact. So, yeah, it's just it's how it is right now. Let me see. We got Josh with a super chat. He says, "Oh wow, Helldivers 2 looks hotter than I expected. Let's fucking go, MBG." Dude, you guys are legitimately getting me hyped for this. I hope this trailer lives up to the hype, man. You like, that's 2 super chats in a row being like, "Bro, this new Helldivers trailer." It seems like it's actually changing people's minds on the game, which is really interesting. New Soul 9, you're saying MBG, Microsoft can simply cover the cost of Spider-Man coming to Xbox if it means they finally get Spider-Man. Sony isn't risking anything technically. I disagree, New Soul 9. See, the thing, well, it depends on how far that goes, right? If you're saying, imagine this, if I'm Sony, I'm going to go to Microsoft and say, you guys want Spider-Man 2? How much are you willing to pay for it? And then Microsoft says, okay, we're willing to cover the cost to port it, and we'll cover, so like if it's like, you know, we expect Spider-Man 2 to sell a minimum of 3 million copies on Xbox, or 3 or 4 million. It's like, all right, we'll agree to that, and we'll end up paying out whatever that doesn't hit in a certain time frame. If you're Sony, you're also going to say, okay, well, we could lose console sales over this as well. How many? We could lose maybe 1 million console sales, maybe 3 million. Maybe we lose console sales because they choose to buy your console. So that's even more money we lose. So you're going to cover that cost too. And that's where it's, again, Microsoft, believe it or not, if Microsoft were to ever try to court Sony that way to pay them for Spider-Man 2, it's like they're literally right back to square one, where it's like that's the position they were in with all the other third party, second party timed exclusivity deals, where it's like Microsoft is only going to continue to pay out so much to cover the cost until it's like we should just fucking buy to own. It's like this is not working. So even then, it's like they could do that, and like it could be like a big dick move where it's like, Sony, we'll give you an offer you can't refuse, and you will bring Spider-Man to us. But that's the name of the game, dude. Who loses in that scenario? Not Sony. Like Sony's like counting their money, be like, I can't believe Microsoft, what are they, idiots? Like, I can't believe they paid us this much money. And it's not that like Xbox fans don't lose because like you just got Spider-Man. It truly is. It's Microsoft's bottom line that loses, and that's why these things don't happen this way. Because again, it's business, and the name of the game is make as much money as you can. Don't lose money. Mitigate the loss of money. Make investments, but don't make dumbass investments. But that would be such a fascinating move. If again, I don't think Microsoft would ever do that. I don't think Sony would ever agree to that. But it would be a funny ass thing if one day Microsoft was like, "All right, Sony, name your price. How much do you want? We'll pay you $1 billion for Spider-Man." Like just some crazy like manic shit where it's like Phil Spencer lost it, bro, or Xbox's CFO lost it, where they're like, we don't fucking care if we're losing money. Like this is about sending a message, At that point, Microsoft may as well try to get GTA 6 exclusive, Why not? Neutral Zone 1, you're saying Sony can make money if they send the games to Xbox but not Game Pass, and they will sell, and it will make sense. Well, again, that's pretty similar to what we just talked about, like the idea of Spider-Man going to Xbox. I mean, everything I just said still stands, but honestly, I just don't think there's a world where Sony determines that whatever, like, Sony is going to believe, understandably so, that if we do that, we're going to lose console sales. And you know what they're going to think? We're going to lose console sales to Xbox. Like, they're going to go buy an Xbox. Sony you have to understand the message that's being communicated. And the message that's being communicated, like, come on, you guys have seen what people have been saying about the rumors of these Xbox games going to PlayStation. And it's like, well, Xbox is dead. Like, literally no reason to buy an Xbox console now, because now it seems like we're even eventually going to start getting their games on the competing consoles, so there's no point. You're already seeing that, and it hasn't even been confirmed. If Sony does that, like, that is what the rhetoric will turn into, and that, I'm not saying it's guaranteed that will actually have a tangible impact on anything, but it could, and I just think at the end of the day, Sony's like, why would we do that when we can just put it on PC? PC has what's the install base of PC, like 1 billion or like 1.4 billion or just some crazy number like that? It's like why would we even Sony bought a studio specifically to port games to PC. The furthest I could see Sony going realistically, again, unless there's some kind of massive colossal shift out of nowhere, the furthest I could see Sony going is what I said earlier, is maybe eventually they do settle on, you know what, we are just going to go day one on PC with all of our games. Maybe that. Maybe Sony can live in this space where it's like, it turns out we can still sell 100 million consoles, or 90 million consoles, and release our games day one on PC with a massive install base, and like basically Sony would love it if they could have the best of both worlds. They just don't know that they can, and they're trying to figure that out without losing something in the process. It's a tough balance, man. Like they are walking a high wire here, where it's like even I don't know the answer to that. Like I don't know if Sony were to put their games, like they just make it clear every single PlayStation Studio game, single player or multiplayer, day one on PC and PS5, every single one. The next God of War, the next Horizon, the next Ratchet, the next Spider-Man, new IP, the next Last of Us, whatever, all of it. I don't know. Like, what does that do to PS5 console sales? Does that make it so that, oh shit, dude, you just lost 40 million in sales? You know? Or is it like you just lost at most 10 million? Or is it turns out it doesn't matter. People who want to play on console buy consoles. And that pretty much was almost everybody, that buys consoles. So that's the problem is Sony does not know the answer to that question. And frankly, we can't look at Microsoft as the, canary in the coal mine, so to speak, where it's like, well, Microsoft did it, but you have to factor in Game Pass. What would Xbox console sales look like right now if Game Pass didn't exist, right? Like if it's Starfield's exclusive to the Xbox console and PC. Or it's exclusive in the sense that it's not launching on Game Pass and it's not coming to the competition's console. What does that change? Does it change anything? We don't know. We just don't know. So it's a really fascinating conversation to have, I think, in regards to PlayStation, because PlayStation, they can't make any drastic moves in any direction, because if they do, they risk falling down. And I know that sounds dramatic, but it's true, because it's just like, think about it. Like we're going to be celebrating PlayStation's 30th anniversary this year. You go 4 generations, 4 console generations, excuse me, doing things in one way, the same way. Rarely ever deviating, if ever, right? To then suddenly your main competitor just changes everything. Actually, your 2 main competitors change everything. One says, we're not really competing in the traditional console market. We're creating a handheld hybrid. So I was like, well, okay. I guess we don't necessarily have to worry that much about Nintendo now. What about Microsoft? And then Microsoft's like, yeah, the Xbox One is a failure. Game Pass, PC, cloud, mobile. We'll still make Xboxes if you want them. So Sony is probably looking around like, well, I mean, we're still doing really well, and the market seems to still be supporting not only our console but our business model. And I to be honest, I think Sony's playing it exactly how they have to play it. I do. I think Sony's playing it exactly how they have to play it, where they're not diving in head first or running full speed ahead in any direction other than the console. Like they still clearly believe that the console is where they should be, full force, full steam ahead. But it's like you guys are saying, it's just everything else needs to be seen as supplemental, as growth vectors, as potential revenue sources that won't be your main source, but a source nonetheless. It can't hurt, it can only help. And the moment it starts hurting, then you take a step back, you slow down, you pump the brakes. I think that's how Sony is playing it. I think that's how they're going to play it for a while. I could see, to be honest, I could see Sony playing it this way for at least 2 more generations. At least with the PlayStation 6. I don't think we're going to see any major shifts with the PlayStation 6. The PlayStation 7 generation, I could see that being the generation where, by that point, I could see the actual entire gaming market changing enough. Enough time has went by where it's not like an overnight thing, but it's like, okay, maybe now Sony is finding a lot more success with mobile, you know, or cloud. And because of that, it just suddenly, it changes their how, but I don't know. I don't know. I'll say at least two generations. Maybe I'm wrong. You're saying by the PlayStation 7, the landscape will be completely different. Well, yeah, I'm thinking so too. If we think this generation is supposedly going to end either 2027 or 2028, so the PlayStation 6, let's just say the PlayStation 6 comes out in 2027. All right. If that generation doesn't have like some kind of artificial extension, it'll be done by 3033. So 3033. Jesus Christ. Longest console generation ever. 2033. 3033. Oh my God. PlayStation 6 forever, bro. PlayStation 6 forever. But the PlayStation 6 generation, you could imagine coming to an end by 2033, maybe 2034 at the latest. Maybe 2035 if you're really pushing it, right? It's like, well, how much different? You know? I mean, that's the question. How much different really will video games be as a whole? Like the entire video game industry and market. What could change? It's basically a decade. In a decade, like what could change to make it so that when Sony is developing the PlayStation 7, getting ready for a 2034, 2035 launch, or even 2036 launch, what could make it so that it's like they're preparing for very underwhelming console sales? I mean, I guess there's a lot of things that could happen. I'm just curious to see what why did I just jump into the PlayStation 7? To be clear, the reason why we're talking, I know it sounds ridiculous, but we're talking about the PlayStation 7 because we're talking about the next two generations. We're talking about like the next two generations conceivably will happen in the next 10 to 15 years. And we're trying to figure out like what changes in that time. Shadow Gamer 24 comes in and drops a membership gift for us. Shadow Gamer, thank you so much for that, man. I actually didn't realize we were. That's the first membership gift of the day. Shadow Gamer, thank you so much, man, for getting us started. I got so engrossed in the conversation, I didn't even realize that. Really appreciate it, man.
Thank you.
W's in the chat for Shadow Gamer. Do you think my timeline is correct, by the way, for the next two generations? I think it's pretty. I don't think it's like perfect, but close enough. Sony and PlayStation and all of their executives has said that multi-platform for Sony means PC, mobile, and cloud. This is what they said to their shareholders. Interesting. All right. Well, I guess that kind of confirms that they weren't talking about Xbox. BGC apparently gave Tekken 8 a five-star review. Damn. That's good. Yeah, Tekken 8 apparently. I don't know. I guess I didn't realize the reviews are coming out now. Jakey Steer saying I see cloud gaming being comparable to hardware today around the PlayStation 7 era. So basically like a decade or a little over a decade from now. Well, we got to think about the fact that companies like Microsoft and Sony are invested heavily into cloud, especially Microsoft. They're experts, especially Microsoft with cloud. And it's like I think they would have a pretty good idea of when this is going to happen, right? Like just some kind of idea. Again, they can't predict the future perfectly, but they have to have some kind of idea. And it seems to be that the general consensus is in like maybe the next 10 or 15 years, give or take. Like we will be at that point, or we should be. So I don't know, man. The future of gaming looks. I don't think it necessarily looks bad. It just it looks different. You know, it looks interesting in that we've seen other major transitions in the gaming industry in the past, but that might be coming up in a couple gens. Boss has decided to join us. You're saying the future of gaming is PC? I don't think so. I think it'll be a huge part of it. Don't you do it, boss? Don't you do it? Don't you do it? No, no. I know what you're trying to do. No, boss. Boss. Boss said, "Yes, I will." Boss is here to enlighten us all and tell us the future of gaming. All right, boss. Speaking to the microphone. What is the future of gaming? Hmm. He's not saying anything. Maybe it's some kind of Silent Hill hint. I don't know. The future of gaming is Silent Hill. Silence. PC. He says PC. The future of gaming is PC. I mean, look, man. I want to make it clear that I don't think consoles are going to go away, at least not anytime soon. In the same way that PCs aren't going to go away. I just think it's going to be an option. You know. Trying to read the chat. Josh Z with a $10 super chat. If I could read what he says here. He says it's important to distinguish the end of the entire generation, the discontinuation, from an industry shift to current gen. I see the former taking much longer than the latter. Yeah, that's true as well, Josh. That's well said. We do need to realize there is. I'm sorry, boss. There is a difference between that, and yeah, I mean, even if you factor in like, oh, what will be the actual last console generation? Well, nobody knows that, but if that day does come where it's like this is the last console for PlayStation, like it's gonna be a long time. Like it's gonna be a long time till that generation actually is done. Like no more consoles being made, no more support. You know, we got Hellbound 1981, the legend returns, and he drops 5 membership gifts for the community. Hellbound, thank you so much, my friend. So Hellbound actually, it says I have 7 members so far, but I'm looking here. It says I have 1 gift from Shadow Gamer, 5 from Hellbound. So I guess somebody, I don't know what's up with that. It says we're at 7. So Hellbound, thank you so much, man. Thank you for always showing some support here for the community. I'm gonna bring the counter up to 7. There we go. I think it was it Boss that did it. Hellbound Boss came on screen and you're like, there he is. PC will never go away. Well, of course PC's never going to go away. Console has a much higher chance of going away than PC does. But I'm just saying that, like, I think that these, like, as long as PC remains like a prominent, viable way for people to play games, I just think that there will always be a console to kind of, you know, offset that a little bit, where because PC is more configurable, it is more customizable, there's a little bit more to it. You know, the console is just kind of that, I think, necessary, simple. I think, well, the form that a console could take could change, you know? Some people believe that consoles are just going to eventually evolve into like streaming sticks or something, or little streaming boxes. That could definitely happen. But Josh, yeah, to get back to your super chat, man, it is important when we talk about the potential end of a console generation. Like, the PS5 is going to be supported for a long time, dude. You know, when we transition to the PlayStation 6, the PS5 is not going anywhere. It's not going anywhere. So, I like that though. Like, within a certain time frame. I think maybe with the PS4 it got a little bit extreme. We got Buck with a $10 super chat, and he says, MBG, impact of Microsoft owning all ABK, all ZeniMax, Obsidian, Ninja Theory, plus marketing rights forever, and putting all day one on Game Pass will lose Sony $2 billion net profits over the next 10 years. The Sony CEO knows this. Yeah, but that the thing about this though is that, like, that's just the fact of the matter, right? Like, there's not really much that Sony could do except, well, the obvious thing. And the obvious thing for Sony, if they, crunch those numbers, do that math, and realize, man, we're going to lose $2 billion net profits over the next 10 years because of this. Well, then that you have to, okay, what can we do to offset that? There has to be something we can do. I'm not here to propose the solution or the answer to that, but what? The thing that I think Sony needs to be worried about with Microsoft, there's only one thing. I'll be honest. Like, there's only one real thing that I think Sony needs to be very, like, they need to pay close attention to see if this is actually what Microsoft's going to try to do and try to pull off. And that is if they're going to acquire another publisher or try to acquire another publisher. Because that's the thing. It's like, okay, well, we lost Bethesda. We lost Activision Blizzard. Although Activision Blizzard, we're not losing Call of Duty. Microsoft is going to be, smart, as they should, with games like that, where it's like, maximize how much money you can make off of them. But it's like, if there's another publisher that Microsoft ends up going after, and the possibility that they could get another one, then at that point, Sony has to really, I think, be very worried, because it's like, dude, they're bleeding you. You know what I mean? At that point, like, assuming that Microsoft doesn't actually go third party, like, they're bleeding you. Literally, they're taking games, studios, developers that you'll never get back, potentially. But that's the whole thing, though, is like, we know that Microsoft wants to continue to acquire. We know they want to keep getting more publishers and developers, but it seems like the only way they're going to be able to achieve that is by actually going third party. Like, they're going to have to go third party and show the regulators that, yeah, we're third party now. So I don't know. I don't, it's one of these things where it's like, you're saying spend Sony out of business. I mean, that's the thing. They could, yeah. Like, they could just buy enough and take enough away from Sony, but it's, it's just, what do you how are you going to achieve that realistically when the regulatory bodies are going to be, if that's truly your goal, like, they're going to catch on to that, and be like, hey, hold on now. So Buck, I do appreciate that super chat, man. And we also have Chris Brown saying, I'll stick with my modded PS Vita. Tons of games, LOL. Well, there you go. Chris Brown set. Chris says, I'm not worried about any of this. I'm not even thinking about any of it. I just got my modded PS Vita. I'm good to go. I'm good to go, man. I'm covered. We got Arnie Vesper. He says, world is too chill on MGS Delta. I'm going bananas here. Yeah, I feel you. I think it's because Konami isn't really talking about it, man. I think that's the problem. Because I'm super excited for Metal Gear Solid Delta. Like, very, very excited. Like, I mean, I could even say that might be my most anticipated game of the year. In fact, I think it is. Just because I love Metal Gear that much. But it's like, they're not really talking about it. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's easy for people to forget that. Oh, yeah, this is a thing. So my hope is that if it's true that Sony's going to do a state of play sometime soon, I hope we see Metal Gear there, but it's hard, it's impossible to determine that. Josh, you're saying they lost everything, MBG. Crazy talk to be expected. That's true. That's true, Josh. You just never really know what to expect. All right, let me see here. Hold on. Wow, apparently, let me check this real quick. I do want to watch this Helldivers video because I thought it was like a minute-long trailer. It's actually like a 5-minute, it's kind of like a 5-minute more in-depth. I don't know if I could call it a deep dive. Maybe that is what it is, but let me bring it up here. Give me just a second. Hold on. Is there any music in this? Like any music that seems like it could get copyrighted? Oh, me. You're saying it just goes in depth? Okay. Well, let's check it out. Let me adjust the volume here. I gotta turn the volume up for you guys. All right. So this is Helldivers 2, a United Stand Galactic War trailer.
Prior to the beginning of this game, the Terminants, which have been confined to their own farm planets, harvested for Element 710, have broken loose, and Helldivers are being mobilized once more to deal with this threat, but also the brand new race. They seem to be called the Automatons, they work as full robots. It might not be a bad idea to put them in their place too. You're going to be playing as a Helldiver. They go through training. Very thorough training. And are frozen until needed. Our cryogenic technology is
and they're frozen until
when
needed.
When you start to play as a Helldiver, they've just been defrosted and ready to command their super destroyer. In the game of Helldivers 2, you are going to spend most of your time in combat, fighting enemies. Everything that's happening outside of the mission when you're on your ship is about strategy. The galactic map shows you the current situation of the war. It shows you what planets are super Earth planets, what planets are being covered by some sort of enemy scum, and where the battlefront is. And as the Helldiver, you get to decide exactly what planet you're going to fight on, what enemies you're going to go against. You get to make quite a number of choices there. At the same time, the Galactic War is the place where Super Earth High Command is going to be communicating out to Helldivers across the galaxy. They'll be letting you know what the current top military priority is. They are broken out into two types of orders: major orders and personal orders. Major orders are big, long-lasting things that the community as a whole is working towards. These are things that are central to the story. There are ways in which you can be a major contributor to changing the face of the galaxy itself. That's going to take the combined effort of Helldivers across the galaxy working toward
that's
that
pretty
type
cool.
of goal.
I like that.
On the personal order level, something that you and your squad can do all together, maybe you'll be sent off to kill a couple of really terrifying enemies, and only in a specific way. And if you do it exactly in that way, you'll get a reward for having done the good work of Super Earth.
An operation is a number of missions. On lower difficulties, you have fewer missions. As you go into higher difficulties, you get more missions per operation. In a mission, you don't simply have one thing that you're doing. You need to shoot the nuclear missile. You need to start up the generators for it. You need to find the launch codes. These are objectives spread out on the map. There's also secondary optional objectives. You don't have to do it, but you are rewarded if you do. Sometimes you find an artillery gun that you can load up and then you can use that artillery gun. But there's also hostile ones. There are artillery emplacements, buildings that disables you from using your stratagems, gooey bug structures that spreads fog.
Damn, dude.
You have your Helldiver destroyer. It can be upgraded. In the ship management, you buy bigger guns, better eagles, and to get those, you need samples.
I didn't expect that.
You find them on the level.
You can
need
upgrade
to
your
extract
ship
to get your samples with you to your ship.
Okay.
The requisition you use to buy stratagems. You get it mainly by just doing your missions. Most of your personal equipment, like your armor, your helmet, primary weapons, grenades, those are acquired in your warbond. And in the warbond, you need medals. You get medals from doing operations. You also get it from doing orders. You have a lot of stuff that you as a player get to choose from and create a loadout that fits your playstyle.
Okay. I mean, it seems like there's pretty...
The Galactic Port isn't just that, though. It's also a place where we, as the developers, can interact with you, watching what you are doing, watching how the community is playing, and maybe, if appropriate, giving you just the weapon you need to push yourself over the edge. Or maybe, if it's the right time in the story, seeing a negative consequence and giving you an added challenge. We don't think that many other games are going to be able to offer what Helldivers 2 can. We love our game, and we want you to love our game just as much as we do. And we want to be part of it. We want to be part of it together alongside you. So, pre-order Helldivers 2 and let us play alongside you.
Yeah, dude, it's looking good. I understand that it's not going to be for everybody, but I mean, I'm glad they put that out, because I think that was very much needed, since there were like no previews or anything yet. Just kind of, show people the game and let them know like more details about it. What are you thinking? What are you guys thinking? I mean, there's a progression system. You can upgrade your ship. I like what they're doing with the bigger operations, where you're like trying to complete objectives and goals for for like with the entire community. I like that. I wasn't expecting that. And the gameplay itself looks good. Day one for you. Yeah, $40. I think that could be the difference maker for this game. The fact that it's not a full $70 title. Is it one of the 12 games as a service? I don't know. I mean, logically speaking, I feel like the answer is yes, it is. But I don't know, the way that, since it's being sold for $40 and the way that they just presented it, I don't know that it's a full-blown live service, but I imagine they're going to want to support it, though, as well. So I don't know that I call it a live service as much as I would just call it, a standalone game that will receive a healthy amount of support, for a good amount of time, for as long as people are playing the game. Is there a versus mode? As far as I mean, if there was a versus mode, I assume they would have talked about it. It seems like it's just PvP, but I don't know. I've been anticipating this game for a little while. I'm curious if like for me, the thing I'm curious about is how the game actually feels to play, because I've seen a lot of gameplay and I feel like I know how it's going to feel, but I'm not entirely sure. Like I'm assuming it's based off of what I've seen, it's going to feel good. I just want to know like how good does the shooting feel? You know, how good does the movement feel? Does it feel clunky? The characters feel weighty? Do they feel too light? Do they feel just right? You know, I'm curious to see this, and obviously this isn't something I can know until I play the game, but I am liking what I'm seeing. You're saying you hope it's not sticky like GTA. I don't think it'll be like GTA. No. I will say it does look like there's weight to it though. Like it seems like from what I'm seeing, when the characters are running and diving and crouching, and like you're not like a super soldier, you know? There is weight and heft to the character. But that's just, you know, what I'm seeing. Yeah, it's true. You could slide, there's a jetpack. I'm looking forward to it, man. I got my copy pre-ordered. Sorry, RE46N2 Ray with a $2 super chat saying, MBG, are you going to look at the Luna Abyss gameplay trailer? I haven't seen this, the Luna Abyss gameplay trailer. Where's it at? Luna Abyss. Did this trailer just come out? Lunar Lander Beyond. Not Luna Abyss. Let me see. Oh, okay. Bring this up real quick. I don't know what this is. I've never.
New Scout. How do you like your cell, inmate?
What kind of prison is this?
A rare piece of drift technology has been detected somewhere in the canyon. We need you to retrieve it for study.
Oh, it's a first-person shooter?
Well done, Fox. Your sentence has been reduced by 100 days.
Is your work so relentless, little scout?
The Scout's job is to explore
feel like
the unknown.
I feel like
and
I remember seeing this
sometimes the unknown
before.
is dangerous.
Why are you helping me?
If you do this for me, I'll set you free.
Yeah, this does remind me of Returnal a bit. It's like a first-person Returnal. The art style reminds me of Destiny a bit. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Well, there you go. That's Luna Abyss. Again, I feel like I've seen it before, but I don't know where. All right. Well, let me see. We're a little over 2.5 hours. Is it exclusive? I don't think so. Yeah, they didn't have a release date there. Well, guys, I think this is where I'm gonna call the stream and I'm gonna open up the members lounge. React to the new Joker Suicide Squad trailer. It shocked a lot of people. People are changing their tune all of a sudden. I'll leave it here. Maybe we'll check that out in the members lounge or tomorrow. I don't know about that game, man. But yeah, guys, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna end the stream here. I'm gonna be opening up the members lounge in like 5 or 10 minutes or so, and I'm gonna hang out with my members in there. So I hope you guys join me in there. Before I go, though, I do want to thank everybody. Thank you for not only supporting me, but supporting my unhinged rants. Really appreciate that. The majority of the conversation was around the topic at hand here, which was what Sony CEO had to say. But of course, at the end there, had to go on some tangent. And, we reacted to the Helldivers trailer, which was nice. So thank you to everybody who gifted some memberships. Thank you to everybody who donated super chats. Really appreciate all the support you guys show. And I also want to give a shout out to Devil Shooter for doing the timestamps for the stream. So again, if you're somebody who watches this later on, utilize those timestamps. And yeah, so again, if you're a member, look out for the members lounge. It's going live in just a couple of minutes. And I hope to see you guys there. Anybody that I don't see in the members lounge or is just going to tune into the next stream, well, I'll see you then. So that does it for this one, guys. Until the next time, take care, everyone.